And members of the media, let me apologize for a delayed start and thank you for responding to our invitation for this press briefing this morning. In the center is our Shadow Minister of Water, MP Ian Hills. To his right is the Shadow Minister for Transport and Works, Michael Phillips, and I'm Julian Robinson, the General Secretary. MP Hills will read a statement followed by Michael and myself, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Thank you, General Secretary. Good morning. The country has been faced by a real crisis since the week before Christmas, affecting the supply of domestic water to households and businesses across the corporate area and Jamaica, rural Jamaica also. The main cause of the problem in the Kingston metropolitan area has been a serious break in the main line which brings water from the Rio Cobre into the Kingston metropolitan area, as well as the frequent breaks in the line from the Constant Spring corridor, which distributes water to the Constant Spring filter plant and many other communities. These two systems serve a large part of the KMA according to the NWC. 105,000 affected persons, and that calculation, however, we have calculated is in excess of over 400,000. The 105,000 speaks to what the NWA speak of, but we think there's greater numbers out there, and I'll list several communities while I go. Several other parishes, including St. Catherine, Clarendon, St. Mary, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Hanover, and St. James, have all been affected during the same period. In these cases, the local or regional systems and pumps supplying water to these parishes fail for various reasons, leaving thousands of households in a crisis over the peak Christmas season in the midst of a dengue outbreak. We believe that much more than the 105,000 persons are affected from communities all over, from Washington Boulevard, Malines Road, Duane Park, New Haven, Corsville, Washington Garden, Patrick City, Pembroke Hall, Jerusalem, Marvally, State Gardens, Zadie Gardens, Dunrobin Acres, Moline Gardens, Kasha Park, Sundown, Seaward Drive, Olympic Gardens, Waterworks, and Waterhouse, and several other communities across the KMA. I would like to deal first with the break at the Rio Cobre pipeline, which was damaged some days before Christmas and gave way to 35 feet of road construction material being compacted on top of it, cutting supplies to several areas along the Spanish Town Road corridor, Washington Boulevard, and Malines Road area. Based on our assessment of the damage and what it would take to restore water to these affected areas, the NWC admitted that it would need to find a more efficient bypass road rather than to excavate the damaged areas. Now the question is being asked, who authorized this? And further into the statement, you will clearly see that there is a disconnect between the NWC board, the management of NWC, and the minister who is in charge of water. In 2015, the former administration convened a meeting with the NWC, NWA, and Chair before the start of the Mandela upgrading project to identify critical infrastructure and underground circuit along the main arteries. This was necessary to avoid breakage and to minimize what is now currently going on. It was made clear then that the old cast iron and asbestos pipelines under the road structure could not take the pressure or constant vibration from earth movement from road construction and compaction. Consequently, it was decided that new pipes would be laid prior to the start of the road construction to remedy the situation and build capacity. It was also agreed that 2 new lines would be constructed. Ferry to Washington Boulevard and ferry to 6 Mile. Unfortunately, neither was constructed. And so the only route to take the water to Kingston remained, and it was under the destroyed 35 feet of rubble and mire. This is nothing short of negligence, causing unnecessary suffering to thousands of residents in homes and businesses across Kingston. This has happened because of the failure to follow proper engineering recommendations to lay the pipes first, and because of lack of ministerial leadership and the existence of an attitude, do not care, and no regard for citizens and their rights to basic water, depending on the water supply across Kingston. Consequently, because of the failure to plan and disregard, the NWC will now have to spend millions to rectify the situation, while people across the spectrum are without water. It is also worth knowing that the rupture in the water supply system will impact negatively on the revenue of the NWC. And I must pause here and say, the NWC is now seeking a rate increase from OUR, and I'm just saying that while they seek a rate increase from the OUR, fix the problems that you are now faced with out there. You have 70% non-revenue water being collected for. People across Kingston and St. Andrew and across Jamaica can't get water, but they have a perfect meter in their front yard. And all we are saying is, before you seek this rate increase, please, we're asking you, fix the problems, then go to OUR and say to the people of this country, you now have an efficient water supply system across the country, so now we're asking for such an increase. This going forward will affect two of the largest projects. This going forward will affect two of the largest projects. Bamboo in St. Ann and Mason Hall in St. Mary have been put on hold by the NWC also. What I'm trying to say is, the majority of projects which are now before the NWC to expedite, they can't expedite it because manpower and resources will now have to be moved to Kingston, which it has had. So rural Jamaica is faced with some serious problems in terms of getting water to the people of this country. I'm also calling on the government, the rapid response system which the past administration had put in place and we had rebuilt to capacity. We are calling on the government to also make funds available to members of parliament and the parish council, because members of parliament are calling every day and are suffering in terms of lack of water across the country. In conclusion, this is a major setback to the goal of providing water for 85% of the population up to 2030. All the PR, videos, and paid media by those responsible, including the minister, are not substitute for providing water to the people. Water is life, and we cannot play with life. The lack of proper ministerial oversight and policy guidelines and the mismanagement within the organization of the National Water Commission are the fault for the present disaster affecting the water of hundreds of thousands of customers island-wide. I want to touch another thing here. A couple of days ago, the NWC came out and said the dam is at 70% capacity. This time, historically year-round, the dam is always at 70% capacity. For the NWC and its management to come out now and fly a kite, basically telling the people of the KMA and Jamaica, people of the KMA, that you're not getting water because the dam is at 70%, it's a false, it's a lie. You're not getting water because of the mismanagement which is taking place as we speak, from Ferry to Boulevard and from Ferry to Spanish Town Road. Who made the decision then there? Who made the decision that we should put the road down before we put the pipelines down? So now the pipelines are being put in place now 2 to 3 years later. Who made such a decision that is affecting almost 1 million of the citizens across this country. I think heads need to roll, and we are calling for the minister, Minister Samuda, the board of NWC, the management of NWC, to take a second look in explaining to the people of this country and the opposition who made the decision to change from putting down the road first, where they say 40% of the road is now complete, before they started to put in the pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to deal with the aspect of the continued mismanagement of the construction works taking place in the KMA, namely the Constant Spring road construction, the halfway tree to Portia Simpson Miller Square, and even the Mandela Highway. A surprise this morning on one of the newscasts, hearing the officer from the NWA, a PR officer, saying that they have tried on numerous occasions to get the contractor, China Harbour, to improve the safety on some of the corridors without any success. We have been saying since the start of the two projects, namely Constant Spring and the Hagley Park project, and even before, at the start of the project for Mandela, in our concern on the safety of the traveling public. Secondly, the lack of concern for those who are using the roadways for pedestrians, and also the lack of coordination between agencies in these projects. One thing we have noted is that there is the Prime Minister keeps mentioning a completion date for March for both Constant Spring Road and the Hagley Park project. And where we sit, those two timelines, they don't seem to be realistic. That would now answer the question on why it is that the contractor is working the way that they are without any consideration for just the general public, the traveling public, and also for services such as internet services and for damages that have been done to NWC pipeline. We have seen the general public complain of just a lack of consideration for, especially on the Constant Spring Road and the Hagley Park Road projects, where there's a lack of flagmen, the road surface that it is provided for vehicular traffic is left wanting. There's no consideration for the businesses along the corridor. There is no consideration for the pedestrians along these corridors. There's a lack of flagmen, and there's a dust nuisance that constantly is bothering the residents in and around the area. We are calling for the appointment for a minister for the Ministry of Works. The Prime Minister, who is currently the Minister of Works, it is obvious that he is not able to manage the scope of work that is being managed by the National Works Agency. We cannot have an agency such as the National Works Agency spending billions of US dollars on projects now in the pipeline and projects to come, and the Prime Minister, who has many other issues dealing with, not being able to give the attention to the National Works Agency and infrastructure projects that is being carried out across the island. We are not asking for a Minister of State, of which he has now, but a full minister to be placed in the Ministry of Works. But what is surprising is that within the Ministry of Economic Growth, you have the Minister of Works, which is the Prime Minister, and you have the Minister of Water, or a Minister of Water in the person of Carl Samuda. We're not sure who it is that is the minister in charge of telecoms. But if within that ministry you have those two ministers, and there cannot be a coordination of works that should take place, then we are having a serious mismanagement problem in the country. But further, to show that the incapability of the Prime Minister in managing so many agencies and ministries, you have an agency such as the Port Authority, who since the elections or the election of the by-election within Northwest St. Ann, taking away the chairman, St. Andrew, taking away the chairman, then chairman of the Port Authority, the current Minister of Finance, there has not been a minister, a chairman for the Port Authority named. So you're having agencies within the Ministry of Economic Growth with budgets and large budgets and large projects taking place without any attention being paid to these agencies. We asked the Prime Minister to at least take control, because even with the Ministry of Water, he is the main minister in charge of water. At least take control of some of the issues that are affecting the general public. And we ask for him to bring all agencies, and we as an opposition, we are willing to at least give our thoughts to some of the issues how to rectify some of the issues. We look at the bypass road that was done for the portion of Simpson Miller Square. We look at the project that was completed in Marcus Garvey Drive, in some of the issues that should have been dealt with, the size of drains that were reduced because of trying to speed up the projects and to cut costs. We're now seeing some of the effects of that in where there are floodings, that roads are being damaged. Now that the Marcus Garvey Drive issue has been highlighted with the flooding, they are now running to spend much more money now to rectify the issues that have been faced by the flooding on the Marcus Garvey leg. We beg the question, are these some of the issues that will be facing the current projects, namely the Mandela, Constant Spring Road and the Hagley Park Road? We're hoping that the adequate drainage is put in in these projects, that some of the issues that we have faced on projects before, that we do not face them currently. And we do think that as we see the work taking place, that there are some cutting of corners in some of the areas that we described. And we are asking that good sense prevails, and that the work that is currently being done is not shortchanged to the taxpayers of this country.
I want to highlight another area that has been affected by what I would characterize as the exceptionally poor planning, the lack of coordination, poor project management, and what I would just regard as a disregard for both consumers and businesses. The disruption in telecommunication services has had a significantly negative impact on a number of businesses. Not just telephone services, but internet services. And there are a number of businesses who depend in terms of connecting with the outside world using computer technology, having customers call them, who have been totally disrupted by cables that have been dug up as a result of the construction work. Many of them have not been compensated. Many of them have had to take out additional lines, make alternative arrangements at their own cost, at significant cost, and there has been absolutely no compensation. And when we look at the full totality of the cost to the public of these construction projects, one, if you look at the traffic jams and the decline in productivity, where people are spending longer hours on the road, they're consuming more gas, they're fatigued coming into work and at the end of the day. My colleague MP Hayes has outlined the water issue that is affecting so many communities across the country. The issue of telephone and internet and cable, the lack of safety that has resulted in accidents on the Mandela Highway, for example, because you don't have proper lighting, you don't have proper signage, all things that can be managed. And then you have schools and businesses that are being disrupted and affected on a daily basis. Children can't get to school, they can't cross roads, dust nuisance. Just this morning I heard a vice principal of a school talking about the impact of the dust nuisance on her school. Now, we are for development, we are for progress, and we want to see these things happen. But there has to be proper planning and coordination. And with respect to the NWA, that is the overall project manager, they have fallen down short with respect to their responsibilities. And it's really a failure on their part that has led to the negative impact of all of these construction projects. We have heard already the difficulty with a prime minister who is the minister of telecommunications, the minister of works, the minister of almost every single thing, and simply not having the time to manage the portfolio effectively. And as such, many of the critical issues that need his attention are obviously falling through the cracks. So we again call on him and the government to give these issues top priority so that water is life. People need to get back water. People need to get back their telecoms and their internet services. And people need to be able to travel to and from work without undue delay. And we regard this as a priority for him and for the government to address. I'm going to invite Member of Parliament Angela Brown-Burke, who has a number of constituents who have been affected by the water issue, to address that.
Thank you very much. There is no doubt that Southwest St. Andrew is one of those constituencies that's really badly affected by the mismanagement, poor planning and implementation of certainly the Hagley Park Road project. So if we take that Hagley Park Road corridor, we're talking about Coburn Gardens Primary School, we're talking about the Majestic Garden community, and we're talking about all those residents and businesses that really come off that Hagley Park Road. Yes, it is true that the businesses, that they have had an opportunity to meet with the government to discuss some of their concerns. But the truth is that not much has been done despite the meetings that they have had. What is also clear from the discussions is that the consumers, the residents, were never taken into consideration at all. So, for example, with the rerouting of the buses through Majestic Gardens, for example, a community that is not used to that kind of traffic coming through, a community that has probably the one with probably the most children that I have seen in Southwest St. Andrew, who are basically there and not used to the kind of traffic coming through. I have written several letters to the National Works Agency asking for them to come down, take a look. I've sent them videos, persons have sent pictures that have been down there, and yet the safety of the residents, as far as I'm concerned, has not been improved. I heard the Shadow Minister speaking earlier about the pipes not being dealt with before the roads, and that, for example, is one of the major issues in the Majestic Gardens community, where you have had to pause work waiting on the pipes to be addressed. And in the meantime, we have individuals who just don't have any water. They have had to be begging for trucks to come in and truck water to them. And I believe that that shouldn't be the indignity that is visited on members of the community. If you have a project that is going to create this kind of dislocation and this kind of disruption, that you have to put things in place to make sure that water is trucked and that they also have a certainty in terms of the schedule of trucking water. It doesn't make sense for you to send one truck of water, for example, for a community that obviously is going to require 5 trucks in any one day. What that is going to lead to is community members fighting with one another to get water. It is going to lead to many of the children not being able to go to school because uniforms are not done, because they can't even cook because they just simply don't have water. Persons have been complaining about respiratory problems because it's aggravated by the dust that is there. So there's that. I mean, we have the whole of those businesses, as I said before, on Hagley Park Road. We have the businesses by the wharf, Kingston Wharves, and Shipping Association. And then we also have the Greenwich Town community, which is a major, major, major problem. Even the widening, for example, of Maxfield Avenue, which is probably one of the elements that was well done. What was not taken into consideration is the number of children and adults who have to cross what is now a much wider and major thoroughfare without any protection. The number of children that have almost been hit down, the number of individuals that have actually been hurt crossing Maxfield Avenue. You have several schools in the area. No provisions have been made for those. We have to bear in mind that whereas most of even Kingston now are faced with this water challenge since a little before Christmas, these communities have been facing these water woes from almost as far back as when the project started. And we have been complaining, they have been trying to make do. It has reached a state now where it is just simply untenable. And we cannot continue to tolerate a government that does not believe that the women, the men, the children in these areas should have access to water. And these are not individuals, by the way, who are not paying their water bill. These are individuals who have no water in their pipe. It has been so because the water pressure has been low for a long time, but they continue to get their bills. They continue to make efforts to pay, although they do not have access to water.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes.
Variety of issues more than 105. Oh, pretty small amount here.
Okay.
The problem exists now. What do you suggest? What methods do you suggest that can be implemented to fix that?
The method before that we had suggested was that you put the pipelines down first and then you deal with the road. In terms of where we are now, I think if there wasn't such a rush in terms of dealing with the road, you would go back and you would fix the break that you now have. But it's going to put you back in the position where you were before, where you're going to start running into, due to the heavy machinery and every equipment, you're going to start finding more and more breakage again as you go. It's not for me to be in the government's position to tell the government what to do. I think being that we were in government, we had set out strategically what the government should have done, what the PNP administration would have done. And we would have hoped that at that point, the government would have taken it up and run with it because, I mean, if you go to any basic school kid, they can tell you that before you put down the road, you put down the pipeline. It is that simple. So from that standpoint, we are where we are. I think a couple things. I think MP Brownberg spoke about this in terms of the trucking of water. I think you have to make funds available to every member of parliament now and the parish council while you're putting in the pipelines as we speak. But the pipeline should have gone in long before.
Other questions? Any other questions?
Hey, with a nation, the Water Commission said just over 100,000 persons are affected by lack of water or low water pressure. You said it's closer to 400,000. How would you come by that?
I think they said accounts.
Yeah.
Over 100,000 accounts.
No, man, I think at their press conference they said 100,000 people, not customers, but more than 100,000 people.
I think it's quite simple. If you look at the population for Kingston, the KMA, and you look at all of those communities which I've listed out before, it can't be 100,000. We know that for a fact, and you know that. And if you go by the amount of persons in a household, so it can't be 100,000. I think the NWC tries its best to minimize what is going on out there and not looking at the impact in terms of how many persons are within a household that is affected by not having water.
If you take a household on average, 3 to 4 persons per household.
Yeah.
So if they said 105, which is probably accounts, people who have an account with NWC, each of those persons has 3, 4, even more in their house. But if you look at the communities that have been listed, we're probably close to 800,000 people.
Yeah.
I am affected in my own constituency. There are at least 3 or 4 corporate area constituencies that are badly affected, not even listed in what my colleague went through. I mean, it might be 600, 700, 800,000 people dealing with.
You said there are some projects going on, one in St. Mary, other in St. Anne. Just for my clarity.
All right. For example, you have Mason Hall and you have Bamboo. What is going on is because NWC had to take resources in terms of to ensuring, because of the problem that they're having in Kingston now, they have moved a couple of their managers into the KMA. They have moved a couple of their managers into the KMA. So in terms of the budgetary allocation for these projects, which are out in rural Jamaica, because rural Jamaica is suffering because of moving personnel into Kingston, it has allowed the NWC in terms of the delay, and some of the projects out there as we speak of now is totally stopped. If you take Mason Hall, if you take Bamboo, they are stopped. Why? Because of the problems that we are now faced with in the KMA.
Would you be able to say how many people are affected by those projects?
I think if you take St. Mary, it would be the entire population of St. Mary. And if you take Bamboo, strategically what the Bamboo system was supposed to do is to ensure that those are on the corridor of the highway in terms of development, in terms of tourism development. You would have water going to those areas. None of those things can be done now, so everything is at a standstill.
So the knock-on effect really is like more like closer to 1 million people.
If you take what's going on in rural Jamaica and if you take what's going on in the KMA, I'd put it at close to half the population.
With so many persons complaining about not having water for weeks, maybe even months, do you think the situation has reached crisis stage?
I think it has. I mean, people call every day, and it's hard. The Jamaican people are now faced with a crisis. I mean, you have dengue, and in terms of, I mean, as a gentleman called me and said to me that if he lived close to Ferry, and he's without water, and people have to start making, because when the water trucks don't come, you have to then go back in your car at some point during the night and try and find water somewhere. So is either you go to the supermarket, and even when you buy it at the supermarket, you're still paying a lot more than what you would pay from the NWC. What I'm saying is, the NWC doesn't understand what the people of this country are now faced with. And I think more so, I think the government could be more proactive. Let's start trucking water to these affected areas. Let's meet with the members of parliament in ensuring that we deal with all of these different affected areas. I think for me that would show that the government at this point is caring and it's being proactive in dealing with the problems of the citizens across this country.
You know, using the word crisis will inevitably lead to accusations of fear-mongering. How would you, it's preempt accusations, how would you respond?
Look, I don't think it's fear-mongering. I think we're listening to radio and we're seeing it on television almost every night, where the people of this country is suffering. We're not against infrastructure development, as the General Secretary mentioned before. We are for infrastructure development. We are for progress. But at the same time, be smart about it. Be smart about it. All we are saying is we wouldn't be sitting here if 2 years ago the government had taken up and said, hey, look, let's not rush. Let's put in the pipelines first in Majestic Gardens and other communities and ensure that when we put down the road network, we will not be able to disrupt the people of Jamaica in terms of water or in terms of their road network. It is that simple. But now what's going to happen? It's going to cost the NWC millions. It's going to cost the government millions in terms of what MP Phillips spoke about also. So in the long run, the Jamaican people are suffering, and they're also going to pay for the level of sufferation that they are now faced with, which is really unfair.
I want you to address this issue of fearmongering, but I want you to really talk about the fear under which many individuals are living. So if we take the St. Andrew South Police Division, that is going to cover St. Andrew, Western St. Andrew, East Central St. Andrew in large measure, South St. Andrew, Southwest St. Andrew. And we know that in those areas we have many of the crime hotspots across the island. When people in those areas have problems with water, we have to understand what that means. What it means is that individuals who probably don't move out of their area often because of the kind of criminal activities with which they are faced, now have to go find a relative or a friend somewhere where they can go catch for a bit, to have their children bathe, to get some water to come back so that they can cook. Understand what that means to them. Understand what it means just across communities at a time like this, simply because they do not have access to water. So quite frankly, if we are talking about just the individuals who live there alone, that for me is crisis for them. And I believe that the government could have and should have taken that into consideration, because they have the statistics. They know what is happening in there. They know. And to leave the people unprotected and forced to go look for water under those circumstances, I believe is inhumane.
All right, thank you. Oh, so you have one more?
Hear a story about just one archery and we're already seeing the road being damaged. Persons accuse the government of hastily putting the project together and lack of proper inspection. Do you share those sentiments?
Well, as I said earlier, it is a concern coming back from the Marcus Garvey Drive project. And the concern is shared with the existing projects that's taking place. You saw the flooding on the Mandela Highway a few months ago. A lot of the projects that is being embarked on, we see where they're cutting the spend on some of the drainage work. We've seen it on the Marcus Garvey where they ignore the drainage work right by Tinston Pen. They did something up by the further up in front of Petrojam because that flooded before the completion of the project itself. It wasn't a secret that out at Tinston Pen would flood. Their excuse is that they would have to go through the port and all of and things like that, but it should have been dealt with. It's a similar thing in trying to rush the Chesterfield. Instead of putting a box culvert, they put the round culvert pipes inside the drainage, knowing that garbage will always flow down those gullies and clog it up. And we see it even during the construction work on the Hagley Park and Constant Spring, that the care for the traveling public in ensuring that there is even proper drainage during the construction. Have you ever traveled down Constant Spring Road when it is raining? It is a river as it is now. And we ask the question, are there adequate drainage being put in now? Seeing that China Harbour has been given a deadline for March, and again I raise the question, is it a realistic timeline? And is it that China Harbour is trying to rush everything, all the works that is being done, ignoring some of the other agencies, that if NWC doesn't come in time to remove their pipes, they are just hitting them out of the way. And that is what is happening on it. And ignoring just the traveling public overall. I would think that all the complaints from the traveling public, that the minister in charge and the NWA would have at least brought China Harbour to the table, because it is obvious that China Harbour is being judged at a different level than our local contractors. There is no local contractor that could operate on any of the projects that are there now and get away with what this foreign contractor is getting away with. And we as an opposition feel that there should be a level playing field, be it local or foreign contractor, because at the end of the day, it is the taxpayers' money that is paying for this. And the concern for just the safety, just being able to give proper signaling, proper signage, just proper surface for vehicles to travel is something that we are concerned of, and that the complaints of the traveling public has fallen on deaf ears.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.